So, how do I look today? Now, the reason I'm asking that is this is a new suit in which you purchased for me as a graduation gift. And I was so excited because the man said, you know, we could make a suit just for you. And my jaw dropped because I have a friend who had given me several suits that were made for him, and I thought that was completely out of the realm of possibility. And I said, really? And he said, yes. And you could still get another suit with what you got. I went, really? So this is what we picked out. And I love it. And then he said, we can personalize the suit. We can put your name in it. And I said, well, that's great. But I tell you the truth. What I really want in my suit is this affirmation. I am blessed. And I thank you. Thank you. Now, some of you have commented that you've noticed I've lost some weight, and thank you for that, because it was intentional. I got to that place on the scale where I felt the walls moving and the floor shaking, and I knew that I had to do something, and so I purposely changed how I ate and the activities that I started doing, and I lost 25 pounds, and I've kept it off the past few months. And now, this is very much an accomplishment, but it was team effort. It took Gail Culbertson to explain what her food plan was. It took Linda Burdett to explain her food plan was. I put them together, came up with the Roberto food plan, and I've stayed on it. And I'm really grateful to have to shed these pounds. And others are joining me within the congregation. And it's all part about how we live consciously. And that's what I discover in this, is living consciously. And so I'm, not only did I graduate from ministerial school, I'm actually trying to live this stuff. So today we're going to talk about awareness, and I want you to know I have been thinking about this all week. How am I going to present awareness? And some of my friends have been helping me, pitching in with all kinds of ideas. And last night I finished a 10-page sermon to give to you. And I realized that would probably take about an hour and a half. And so this morning at 3:30 I woke up thinking, that is not going to work. That's not going to work. It has to be simpler. And so at 3:30 I started crafting some new ideas, and we'll see how it comes out, okay? This is an experiment, and you're in it with me. Now, the reason why we're doing awareness is because this is the third Sunday that in the Keys to the Kingdom series, and we have done commitment and vision, and now we're talking about awareness. And when we talk about awareness, what are we trying to be aware about? Well, we're trying to be aware of truth and how truth works in our life. And awareness is the ability to directly know and perceive, to feel, or to be cognizant of events. More broadly, it is the state of being conscious of something. So awareness and consciousness are two ways to describe our ability to perceive and demonstrate truth. Now, interestingly, when I did a search about awareness did not become a part of our vernacular until the mid-20th century. And so when I went back to the writings of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founders of Unity, and I went back to these original writings of other New Thought writers, awareness never comes up because it wasn't a word that was being used. They were using consciousness. Awareness and consciousness are ways to describe our being. Like when we say that we are human beings, we are saying that we are beings that are human. When we say that we are conscious beings, we are beings that are conscious. Now, we rarely say that we're aware beings, but we could do that. We are beings that are aware. And knowing and saying that we are aware or that we're conscious doesn't really mean that we're all that aware or all that conscious. But we have that possibility and that opportunity to become more consciously aware in our spiritual life. Because awareness and consciousness are relative terms. There's no fixed measurement to it. Awareness that we seek comes from the divine mind. It is the mind of God. It is the mind of Christ. So the awareness that we're thinking about, that we want, comes from God. And what we seek is beyond the limits of human experience. It goes into the unlimited experience of spirit. Basically, we want to be like Jesus. He got it. He was living in an unlimited experience of spirit. So that's our goal. That's what we're really kind of working for. So when we're born into this world, we're aware that our world is centered around our physical needs. Feed me, burp me, let me go to sleep, let me digest some of that what I just fed, change me, and the process continues. But we're told that psychologically we're also needing love and touch and attention and stimulation. And some of us don't get enough in those areas. And some of us get too much in those areas. But all that we receive goes to assist in our awareness. Now, I did not have much of an awareness of spirit in my infancy, I don't think. I don't know when I started to really understand that there was an awareness or that there was a spirit. And most of us don't start developing that till later in life. I just know that when we come out of it, at some point we're saying life is good or my world is good, or sometimes we're saying, I don't like this. I don't like this. This has got to change. However, wherever we're at in our awareness, we have the power of imagination, which we spoke about last week. We have that power of imagination to change our awareness, to grow in awareness, to think beyond. And we think beyond because, we have that in our spiritual DNA to think beyond into other possibilities. We have that in our spiritual DNA. But we also have that because we are informed by others that there's possibilities out there. When I was a small child, I was aware that I was alive and I had needs, and I wanted my way in all things. This, of course, didn't happen with all my needs. My needs were met, but it didn't always happen in the way that I wanted them done. And then my sister Sandy was born, and I was about 6 years old, and I don't have a conscious memory of that. So I know that it had to be traumatic because I can go back to age 2 with all kinds of memories. And that was, pretty substantial, bringing this new child into the house. And I don't remember her birth. But I can imagine that I didn't want to share my domain with her. And I do remember that there was a lot of crying and pooping, and there were a lot of new responsibilities that fell on me. And no one asked me if I wanted to participate. No one asked me if I wanted to be on Team Sandy. And I would have as an adult, but at age 6, there was no sign-up sheet. And I was aware that life was kind of confusing for me. Now, it isn't confusing for everyone, but me as a child, it was confusing. And it involved a lot of work. And I was also aware that French fries were God's gift to mankind. And I was also aware that there was something fishy about this man, Santa Claus, that brought me these presents every Christmas. There was just something fishy as things went on. And I knew enough not to question it. I was smart enough not to question it, because if you question it, but I knew enough to reframe who Santa Claus was in my life, because I was on Team Sandy and I had to protect her. And that was really important. And as life goes on, life informs us of our awarenesses. We become informed by our churches, our religions, our communities, and our family, and our experiences. So in this world of awareness, God gives us this wonderful opportunity to be in communion with Him. And He does this by our awareness. And you know what happens is that we get confused. We get all caught up into our experiences of life and everything that we're being told, that it blocks the awareness, that we don't get the true awareness of God's presence in our life. There's all these filters that get in the way. And so the task that we have on our human journey is to let go of these filters so that we have a true communion with God, that nothing is between us. And some of these filters are done with little elbow grease, spiritual elbow grease, prayer, meditation, contemplation. That's the easy stuff. And then some of them are a deeper cleanse, like forgiveness and taking action and taking ownership for our own thoughts and feelings. And then there are filters that are removed by more drastic measures. And that's like slaying our dragons and going into the darkness. And sometimes we don't have any choice if we're going to go into the darkness or not, or we're going to slay a dragon. And I'm thinking about Paul on the road to Damascus. Paul did not have a choice for that light to come and blind him and completely turn his life around. He didn't really have a choice in that. It was like Spirit said, Paul, you're going to get this. And he had to let go of everything that he completely knew before. He had to let go of all that baggage in an instant. Of course, it took him a few days to recover from that. And each one of us has those moments of darkness that we don't have a choice. We have to let go. And it's not easy. I'm also thinking of Myrtle Fillmore. Now, Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, she actually kind of started the movement, and she started it based on prayer. She had a realization as she went to a lecture one night, because she'd always been a sickly person, and she was told that she was always going to be a sickly person. And the speaker that she heard that night said, "You are a child of God. You do not inherit illness." And she got it. I do not inherit illness. And she spent 2 years sequestered in her bedroom in prayer. Now, while that sounds like this very holy and sweet experience of 2 years of prayer, I can imagine that she faced some demons in there, meaning she met some dark spots that she had to face head on and pray herself through it, because she didn't have the benefit of someone else to help her through it. And I'm so grateful to her for going through that, because what came out of it was incredible light. And it gives me hope. It gives me solace knowing that whatever darkness I'm going to go through, that there can be light on the other side of it. I happen to have, and I know I'm not alone, a fear of heights. And this past week I was watching a video about the making of the Empire State Building. Now this photograph has always made me a little queasy. But as I was watching the video, these same men were doing all kinds of antics on these beams, 800 feet above the ground. And this happened, how many years ago? 80 years ago? And I was still queasy from watching them do antics 80 years ago because I still had fear that they were going to fall, even though this had happened in the past. Now, I'm aware of that fear, and it happens to be, the good thing is it really protects me in so many ways to have a fear of heights. But in some ways, I realize it's just one of those things that I'm going to have to live with, and there's nothing wrong with that. So all of us are going to have fears in our lives that we get to live with. It just means we're human. There's no guilt for having fears. There's no punishment for having fears. It's just we learn to deal with it. And I'm very grateful for the Empire State Building because it's a beautiful building, and it's a tribute to these men who, if they were my father, I would have been spanking them when they got home. Now, David Owen Ritz in Keys to the Kingdom actually gives us 7 points about awareness. But the only 2 that I'm going to share today, because I think that they're really crucial in our understanding of awareness, is that God is the one and only source of our good. And when we hold that in our hearts and our minds, and we know that whatever's happening to us, that God is the source of our good. And the second one is everyone deserves abundance. And I'm going to translate that into everyone deserves good. So when we hold that in our hearts, we know that as we let go of the filters, as we remove those filters to our awareness of God's good in our life, we know that we deserve that. There's no second guessing that. It was kind of interesting this week. I don't know if anybody saw it in the paper, but there was an article that said that the Vatican thought that prosperity gospel distorted the American dream. And they were basically saying there are people out there talking about prosperity, preaching prosperity, and it's not relative to the rest of the world because there are so many people throughout the world that are poor. And I thought, well, maybe they're only getting part of what this is about. Prosperity gospel is about living and knowing that God is our source, that our source is always available to us, and that we have tools that we can open ourselves up to the source. Now, I realize that we are privileged, very privileged people in the sense of the world. Most of us have lived in comparative prosperity and abundance, overabundance, compared to the rest of the world. So it might be easier for us to visualize that. It might be easier for us to be aware of that. However, prosperity consciousness is available to all. And it does not depend on how big your pocketbook is, how big your bank account is, or whatever tangible assets you may have. It is about knowing that God is your source. It's about knowing that you have the ability for perfect health and wholeness, that you have a regenerative power inside of you, a resilience to continue in life with happiness, with creating heaven here on earth. So Reverend Brian, he was the former pastor here, and he loved David Hawkins. And he did a lot of talks from David Hawkins. And frankly, David Hawkins, I so admire. And when I read his stuff, I'm here and David Hawkins is up here. So I feel like I'm just barely skimming the surface of what this man teaches. But he's really all about consciousness. And he says that the way that we bring awareness into our lives, he gave a list, and I just want to share them with you briefly so that you can contemplate these things, that you can think about bringing them into your lives. The first one you already know. You enter into times of contemplation, meditation, and prayer. The second one is you enter into an attitude of learning rather than receiving gain. So the object of life isn't that you're receiving gain, you are learning, you're going along the way, understanding how spirit works in your life. You enter into awareness with humility. You let go of the ego. You tell the ego to take a hike for a little while. That we have a willingness to overlook and forgive. We come to life with kindness. That's a tough one for me. I got to tell you, I like to remember stuff, and it's not always the good stuff that I remember. And sometimes I find it challenging to overlook things because they weren't done my way after all. And, my way is the best way. If you ask me, it's for me, yes. But we must come with kindness, with an open heart. That we develop a curiosity of the nature of consciousness, which means that we go and we explore what the nature of God is in our lives. We seek to love rather than receive it. Now, I think sometimes I can do that. Sometimes I think I can do that. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge because, as a human, I'm in a reciprocal relationship with each person and event that comes into my life. And so I can love those who love me back. It's really difficult to love those who aren't loving me back. And I'm often giving love, probably with some sort of unconscious belief that I'm wanting it back from another. We avoid creating enemies. It's so easy to do. We see it all the time in the media now, don't we? All through the news. Every week, you're supposed to have a new enemy, depending on whose side of the gate you're on. We give up guilt. Do you hear that, people in Keys to the Kingdom? We give up guilt. And when any one of you master that, please let me know. Because you're going to be speaking. You're going to teach us how to do it. Just today, I've had a handful of conversations already where people have expressed guilt for not accomplishing what they had set out to accomplish, for not being what they thought they were supposed to be. Give it up. I'll do a message on that someday, okay? Must have a willingness. We must realize that truth is dependent on the context. So truth is as dependent on what we understand about truth. And we don't understand everything about truth. And that we practice non-attachment and acceptance. These are the ways that we can expand our awareness. These are the ways that we can grow as an individual, as a community, as a partner, spouse, mother, father, is by opening our hearts and following some of these examples. Will you join me in prayer? Loving God, thank you for opening our hearts. Thank you for creating in us an awareness of your power in our lives, that we know that healing is here, that love is here, that power is here, that strength is right here, that faith is here. We claim that in our lives right here, right now. As we go out into our world, we proclaim it to others. We claim this in the name and the nature of the living Christ. Amen.